Hi ladies, hi gents. I want to share a video with you today, and I had shown you this beautiful, very large flower, and so many of you asked me for a tutorial on this flower, which is actually the same flower as this one that I've shared with you before. The only difference is the size circles that you use, which you can see there's quite a big difference. So I am going to attempt to get this tutorial done today. I have tried to prepare and get things ready as much as I can so that it will keep the tutorial shorter, because I do know some people don't like very long videos. So I am going to make a large one, but all I'll say is all you do is just use a different size circle to get the smaller one. I mean, this large one is very large, and I used a 6.5 inch circle. This one, I think I used a 2 inch circle. And all you do is increase the circle to the size you want. So you could use a 3 inch, a 4 inch, a 5 inch. It doesn't matter what size circle you use, you'll just get a different size flower. Because I do get a lot of people saying, what size circle did you use? And, you know, although I tell you the size, you can adjust it to the size that you want to use. Okay. So, let me move that to one side and just put a glue stick in my glue gun. Okay, I'm just going to show you the fabric. I'm going to do this in a sort of rose pink fabric, just so the stitching shows up, and I would suggest a lightweight fabric for these, because you are sewing and you are going to gather it, whereas if you use a very thick fabric, the gathers wouldn't be as much. It would still turn out beautiful, but it's a bit harder to work with. And I would suggest also not to use a shiny fabric the first time you do it, because the fabric will slip. And I think until you've made a couple, then you could do it with like a satin or that, once you've got used to working with the fabric. So I cut 20 6.5 inch circles, and I fold my fabric up and cut about 4 circles at a time. And I'm just going to show you the fabric. It was actually from a curtain, so you can see it's still gathered, that I found in a charity shop. Yep. And this was a door curtain, so it was very long, and I paid £3.99 for this. And as you can see, I've used quite a lot of it so far. I've made lots of flowers with this fabric, and so, you know, you don't always have to go to your local haberdashery or anything. You can go to a charity shop and find like curtains, or even a dress or anything that's got a lot of fabric that you like. I loved this colour, and I bought it as soon as I seen it, because I knew that I would use this colour, and it was a perfect weight fabric that I would use for flowers. Okay, so you need to cut 20 of these circles, whatever size you choose, but I cut 20 of the 6.5 inch. I've got a few here. The reason I've only got 3 here is I'm going to show you how to start it off, and then I have got one that's got the full 20 on ready, so that you don't have to sit here and watch me sew all 20 circles. Okay, so you will need quite a long thread, because obviously you're sewing 20 circles and you can't stop halfway and change your thread, so make sure you use quite a long piece of thread. And if you really want to know how much to use, I'd lay your 20 circles out and make sure that your thread would be long enough to sew across all 20. Okay, so what you need to do is fold your circles in half. So I'm going to fold these 3 in half. And they don't have to be perfect because you're going to sew a bit in from the edge to make sure you're catching all the fabric anyway. So now I sew without pinning, but you can pin this together and then just do it that way, but I just sew. I'm a messy sewer, so I'm not very good at it, so I don't pin, I don't you know, I don't have perfect stitches or anything like that. So you've got your half circle, and what you're going to do is you're just going to do a running stitch halfway, and I sew a little bit in. Let me see, I need to zoom in a bit for you, because you want to make sure that you're catching both sides of the fabric, and I'm just going to do a real quick running stitch. I've got a loop on my thread, hang on. Okay. You know, it really doesn't have to be perfect sewing at all. And I'm going to go halfway up my fabric. I mean, it probably is a lot easier if you pin it on your first one. I just don't. I just go with things, I'm afraid. Let me see. I'll just do another couple. And it doesn't have to be exactly halfway, just so you know. Right, so I'm halfway up that circle. You can see I've just done a real rough running stitch halfway. Now you're going to take your next half circle and you're going to lay it across like so. So where you've stopped stitching, you start the next half circle. And then you want to stitch all 4 pieces of the fabric, so just make sure you've got the back, and you just carry on your running stitch halfway again. Very rough stitching. Please don't think you have to be extra neat. The only thing that's important is that you keep you catch all the fabric in your stitches. That's the only thing that's important, otherwise it won't work properly. That's the only thing that is important. Neatness and perfection is not required on this stitching. Right, got another couple before I get to the halfway point. You would need longer thread if you were doing all 20. I'm only going to do a couple to show you, and then I'll show you the one that I have done all 20. So I'm at the halfway point again on this one. So now I add my next circle. So that will go that way. So you're going to end up with a spiral of fabric in the end. And I just feel the back to make sure that I've got all 4 bits of fabric. you don't want any the problem with using a long thread is you could get knots, and you really don't, because you're going to gather it, so you can't have any knots or anything, otherwise it will stop you from being able to gather it. Just check I've got all 4. And this is where, you know, if you pin it, you can make sure you've got all 4, but I normally just sit on the sofa and I don't know, the time it takes to pin it, I think could have sewn half of it, and that's why I don't pin. For no other reason than that I probably should. And you don't even have to trim off the excess when you know all this bit. Don't worry, you're not even going to see that. So, okay, where's my halfway? Right. So let me open that out so you can see. So I'm halfway again, and I would add my next piece, just following the same pattern. You just lay it across, keep going, and do all 20. There's no point me sitting here and doing all 20, because it's just the same thing over and over and over again. So I'm going to show you one that I've already done that's got all 20 on it. So I'll move that to the side over there, and let me show you this. Right, so this one, as you can see, it twists as you do it. I have all 20 of the circles sewn on, and what it ends up doing is twisting round in a circle. So all 20 are on here. These ones I've gathered up, pulled the thread. I can easily unruche them, and it ends up with these petal shapes. So let me gather the whole thing. Because once you've got all 20, all you're going to do is gather them down, and that's all 20 there. And that to me is a beautiful big flower in itself, and then you could do another layer and another layer, but that's not what I do for this particular one. So what I'm going to do is just stitch off the end with a couple of knots just to hold it in place. And even though you have to sew with a long thread, actually once you gather it, the thread, you have quite a lot left over. I mean, it depends, you could gather as you stitch, but you'll just do it the way you think it should be done. Now, so there's your 20 petals. So now it's just a case of what we're going to do is I'm going to be putting stamen in the centre of this one, but I'm just going to show you first what literally all you're doing is rolling these up. So it's going to roll up like that, so that's, you know, all going to be hidden, and you could keep your thread and stitch it together. On the smaller ones, that's what I do, but with the bigger one, I'm going to use hot glue on this one, just because it's quicker, and you can kind of do it as you go. But I want to get my stamen. Now I'm using these stamen here that are vintage. I got these from a guy that had them in his loft for about 20 years, and he had bought all the stock from an old sewing shop and put them up his loft, and I was fortunate enough to meet him and buy these, and I will be absolutely devastated once I run out, because they are glass and I love them. But they will run out eventually, well, probably sooner, because I have used quite a lot of them. But you can get stamen, beaded stamen, excuse me, on eBay, or if you order from China, you can get them from China. And I just use one of these loom bands to hold them together, because they're in little bunches, and I want to make it into one big bunch. So I just use one of them whilst to hold them together and in place. You could use wire, and if you don't want to use stamen, you don't have to. You can roll your flower up and set it, and then put a bling in the centre. It is a personal choice. What did I put in the little one? I did put stamen in that little one. Okay, so I'm going to use this to start rolling my flower up. Now I want these to be seen, so if I put the fabric really close to them, they're not going to be seen. So I start quite a bit down so that the stamen are going to be seen. And all I'm going to do is pop a bit of hot glue on there. I have to use my glue gun, it needs cleaned. I just hold that in place for a minute, let it set before I start. And then I'm going to start wrapping round the stamen, and then what I do is I glue a bit as I go. You can use fabric glue as well. I have done it with fabric glue. Like if I've not been well, I'm going to show you from the bottom because it's going to be easier. So I'm just going to glue a small piece and turn. Glue a small piece and turn. And just pressing it as I go to make sure that the glue holds and sets. And just keep twisting it around. The hardest part is the sewing. Sewing all the circles together. But once you've done a few, the first couple just didn't work properly for me. But by the third time, I'd got used to how it needed to sit, and using the lighter weight fabric. I think the first one I did use a slightly shiny fabric, and the circles kept slipping, and it did make it harder. hope you don't mind watching this bit. I do know tutorials can be long and boring, but hopefully this one won't be too bad. It's so hard to do a tutorial in shorter time, and I don't do like the fast forward because, well, to be honest, I just don't have time to edit videos and that. I hardly have time to do tutorials, so to have to edit and do lots of other stuff with them I just wouldn't have time. So there's a flower which I love, so I've still got my stamen popping out there. So at this point I will, hang on, let me just grab, is that going to be too small? No, that should be, I've got some very small felt circles. So you can use fabric, you can use felt, you can use anything. I'm just going to put a good dollop of hot glue around those stamen because I want them to stay in place, and I want to trim off the extra bit, so I really want that hot glue to hold that in place while I do that. So I'll just give it a second to set, and then I'm just going to cut those off. If you're using stamen, if you're going to build a flower without the stamen and then add something to the centre afterwards, obviously you don't need to do that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, I know it's smaller than the circle, but it just gives it a bit of hold. I think I can take a little bit more of those off actually. I'm just going to pop this on there just to help secure that a bit, because there's a lot of fabric there and I just really want to hold it in place. I'm just going to pop this on there, and that just helps secure it a bit more. Okay, so there's my flower, and then you just open it out and puff it, and you can move the petals in the direction you want them to be. They're lovely and puffy and you know, movable, and you can just make the flower and play with it as much as you would like to. See. I'm sort of looking at this from an angle, so I'm hoping it looks okay from the camera angle, because obviously I'm looking at it down here. And there's your flower. Now they are beautiful on their own, but if you do want to add other layers, I'm going to quickly show you how I did my other layers. So if that's all you wanted to know is how to make this bit, you can stop watching if you don't want how to layer it up with other pieces. So I'm going to go on to show that. So and like I say, it's the same for any size circle that you use. You'll just get a smaller flower or a bigger flower if you use bigger circles. I mean, you could make a 10-inch one and make the most amazing, massive, beautiful flower. it would be absolutely stunning. So I just want to, I've got some bits of doilies here, and I just want to see, yeah, you would see that one. I just want to get a few layers of doilies. I think I'll go for that one as my biggest one, and maybe that, yes. And this one in between, and then that one, that one. Let's have a look at that on there. So I just, you know, pick out a few doilies and just see which ones, different sizes, to layer up as to how it's going to look. I think I'll go with those. I might use that one in between though. Okay, so I'm going to start with the biggest one at the bottom, so I'll just move that to the side. So this is going to be the bottom of my flower. Now I would reinforce this either with a bigger felt piece, but I have some of these little coasters, so I'm actually going to use this on there, so so that it gives it a bit more of a stable base, is what I'm thinking, you know, just to give it a bit more structure. And I will put one on the back of it as well, but I'll do that when I've finished. So that gives me a bit more of a sturdy base. Now, as you can see in between here, I've got lots of shabby layers, so I'm just going to show you what I did with that. I use a fabric, I do use cheesecloth, but I also use this cotton scrim, which is a lot of a looser knit, so you can pull it apart, and I mean you can cheesecloth, but this is a real sort of loose cheesecloth. And I look for this on eBay. Just when I run out, I just type in cotton scrim, see what comes up in, and find the cheapest and buy it. So I've cut a load of squares out of the cotton scrim, and again I just fold it up and chop away. I don't measure anything, and these are roughly 4 to 4.5 inches square. I do a lot just by look rather than measurements, and I normally use 2 pieces of scrim, and you've seen me make these before, so I'm not going to show you all of them. It's just I offset them, fold them offset again in half, and then I just do a rough corner like that, so you get a kind of triangle shape, and there's lots of offset edges. And then I just pop a tiny bit of glue in there. Just be careful, because obviously it's so fine that you can feel the glue through it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to switch off for a moment and make a load of these into the shape, and then I will come back and layer it up with you. Okay?